when I was making the movie, I followed you around for a couple of days with my camera. We did a lot of filming, but I wasn't able to use that footage in the film because there were some things that you couldn't talk about at that time. And I understand that you're able to disclose some of your research that you couldn't disclose to me then. Can you tell me where you're going with all this?
Yeah. When my kids started eating in the first grade and I looked at the contract that was in place in my district for the food service with an outside company, food service management company, I couldn't understand what they were doing in my district. They were working for a pittance. The stated management fee was very, very, very small. I was shocked. I didn't think a big company like that would come here and work for so little. I thought, nah, this is not possible. What's going on? And what I saw was a clause in their contract preserving any rebates they get from any of their national purchasing arrangements for them, not crediting those rebates to the school. And I thought, I wonder how much those rebates are. Is it pennies? Is it dollars? And that's when I learned, through a lot of digging, that there was a lot of money involved in those rebates. The reason for being in the schools was the rebates, not the fee. What was particularly troublesome, because I started making an effort to learn about the company that was here in Weston first, because I knew that one. I knew one contract, and I started making Freedom of Information Act requests for many of those contracts from that company. They were all exactly the same. And what was very troublesome is that the request for proposal, remember invitation for bid, request for proposal, the request for proposal put out by the school district said very clearly, we get credit for all the rebates, discounts, and allowances. And I thought, well, how did it go from those terms, and after all, it is a request, it isn't a demand, it's a request. How did it get from there to a contract which said, no, flip it, we're keeping the rebates? And I thought, that bothered me terribly. And one of the problems was why would a school district allow that to happen? Because the other guy in the room bidding on the contract may very well have intended to give the rebates back and credit the rebates, but that meant that his bid was 250% of the company that decided to flip the terms of the RFP and write into the contract just the opposite. That fellow who was responding to the terms of the RFP could not win the contract, and didn't every time. There are real reasons for that. And when I figured out what really was going on, I realized, my God, the schools are telling the government that they're abiding by their sponsorship agreements, because schools are really just sponsors of the National School Lunch Program. And they're in full compliance with the program, and so they should be reimbursed. We haven't talked about this part of it, but they should be reimbursed for the meals they've served.
By the government.
By the government.
Right. They get a certain amount per qualifying meal.
Exactly. Depending on the child's economic circumstances, it could be a lot of, just a little. This year, a free meal brings $2.57 from the government. A reduced price meal brings $2.17 to the school's coffers, and a paid meal brings 24 cents. I'm talking lunch, this is also breakfast. But anyway, they were taking the government's money with certifications that they were in compliance with their agreement. Well, it turns out that the school districts were not in compliance with their agreements, because they were not allowed to just let go of the rebates, discounts, and allowances. And I thought, now, here's the government wanting adherence to a program, and the obvious adherence, the value of that adherence in this narrow sense was, if you're going to run a program and there are discounts available to you, darn it, get them.
Right.
You've got to run a sound business. Don't just, let go. It's your money. It should be your real cost, not some other cost. It's the net cost that you should be incurring. the $8, not the 10, in this case $12.50 by the time it reaches the school. And I realized that that was really an irregularity and it was wrong. And I realized that the blame or the people who ended up with the benefit of this were the management companies. One point in all of my research, because I said to myself, I don't know what you do about this, because the agreement actually says, the agreement between the school district and the management company says the management company can keep the rebates.
So the school district has made this allowance by contract to the management company, and yet they're telling the government they're in compliance.
Right, exactly. You got it. And I'm thinking, the government wouldn't be happy with this knowledge because they expect all that money to stay in the program. It can do good things like better food, things that we care about, maybe better benefits for the folks who work in the cafeteria, better lighting, you name it. It should stay in the program. Well, it wasn't staying in the program, and I thought, well, gee, as a matter of contract, the districts agreed to give up the rebates. There's no contract action. What is the problem? And the problem, of course, was brought home to me when I discovered this thing called the False Claims Act, where you can't make a claim upon the government with a statement that's false. So here the federal government is running its program on the basis that everyone's in compliance, and no one is in compliance that has these cost reimbursable contracts. Once again, the fixed price contract, this wouldn't be a question of compliance. The False Claims Act makes it really clear. If you certify or submit false bills to the government and they pay you and they overpaid, or there is a drain on their program, as these rebates were, you are liable for damages. Now, there's a little issue here because the certifications were done by the school districts, not the management companies.
So who's
but,
liable?
Right,
there?
exactly. Well, it's real simple. The management companies entered into this switch knowing, as they even state in their contracts, the regulations that govern the school lunch program. So they knew. And that's why in the False Claims Act, there's really clear language, and there are many cases, that say, if you knowingly cause a false claim to be made, you're the one who's liable. The food service management companies have the money. They're the only ones who benefited from the drain. The school districts are out the money.
Right.
So by causing and ending up with the money, you have a liability. I couldn't talk to you way back when because the case was filed that I brought on behalf of the taxpayers and on behalf of myself. That is to say, as a whistleblower, I get a reward, an award, if it's successful, if there's a basis for this lawsuit. I feel very strongly there's a basis for the lawsuit. I was amazed at what I discovered. And the Treasury recovers the damages. The damages are all the money that just left the system.
Have you figured out how much that is?
People might challenge my optimism, but depending on the time period we're talking about, optimism meaning it's a high number. Yeah, $1 billion.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really significant amount of money.
Yeah, over
Right.
time. And
Okay.
in fact, I'm going back 10 years. It probably brings us to the next discussion, which is your question about the regs having changed. The regs didn't change. I just got papers from the defendants, and they used the word the regs changed, and the date was October 31, 2007. The regulations are very, very, very clear. They couldn't be more specific. You are not allowed as a grantee or school district sub-grantee. The grantee is this agency called the state agency. You are not allowed to incur a cost that isn't allowable. The definition in the Office of Management and Budget Circular 87 of an allowable cost is a cost that is net of all rebates, discounts, and allowances. You can't just give them out to your buddies or to someone else who decided they want to do some business with you. You have got to run the program efficiently. This is big stuff for the government because otherwise the cost of these programs would be crazy.
So this idea of the regulations changing, and they didn't change.
One audit on April 30, 2002, recommended to Food and Nutrition Service that runs the National School Lunch Program for USDA was that now the state agencies, the folks at the state boards of education, review the RFPs to be triply certain that rebates, discounts, and allowances are to be credited to the school district, and 2, review contracts in which there must be no changes anymore. The contract has to be consistent with the RFP, and now it's a matter of regulations that that language has to be in the contract. Those regs were always in place. The only reg addition, it wasn't a change, was to require that the contract contain language which can be found at 21021 ERF, I forget. And so that was it. It was just a way of saying, okay, going forward, let's be sure we spelled it out if there was ever any doubt, which there never was.